I am an artist living in beautiful Vermont, USA, and I have a lot of questions. So I engage the minds of the people that I meet. Poets, writers, artists. I explore what's inside and share it with you. My name is Ricky McEachran, and I am eager to know. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Eager to Know. Today I have a special guest. I have a local resident who is an artist. You are a dancer, dance instructor, you are a writer, an overall creative individual. Matt Peake, welcome to Eager to Know.
Thanks for having me.
So did I cover everything? We had, I know you do pastels and paints, you do dance instruction and dancing, and then also you shared with me that you do writing. Is there any other creative outlet that I didn't mention?
I try to be creative in everything I do, whether that's cooking or playing with kids or people, and maybe even collaborating in projects with people, in collaborative art and collaborative activities. Yeah.
So, what does it mean to be creative in interacting with children? Or I think I know what it's like to be creative in the kitchen with cooking, but in those other areas, what does that mean? What does that look like for you?
I guess if I go into a situation with curiosity and just being open to what's going on, and just see what in this case the kids are interested in, and then play with them, play along, suggest things, see where they're going with something, and then embellish it. So I guess I tend to, I have this I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but I like to do things differently all the time. And so when I approach things, whether it's speaking or whether it's play, I try to make up stuff as I go.
That sounds like that would make life very interesting.
I think it is. So sometimes other people get tired of trying to figure out where I'm going with my kind of my ideas.
I can see that.
Yeah.
You mentioned curiosity, and obviously the title of this podcast is Eager to Know. I am an extremely curious person, and that curiosity has definitely helped in my creativity. I'm constantly asking people all sorts of questions. I recently was with friends' nieces who were eighth grade and third grade, and I was very curious about them. I was asking, what are they doing in school? What are they studying? And I wasn't trying to just like make small talk. I was genuinely curious about what is going on with kids, and my friend sort of commented that he doesn't normally interact with them in that way. I think he sort of was the type is giving advice and things like that, as opposed to asking a lot of questions.
No, I think that's a great way to be. And at least what it tells the child or the other person you're with is you're interested in them, and then it lets them open up and it lets them be free and express themselves. So that's a great approach. I think, whether you're 2 or 22 or even older. So it's a great way. I started out in life, and I don't know how this happened, but somehow helping people was something that got instilled in me from early childhood. And again, I don't know where that came from, but I know when I was in high school, I had a good friend, and we were talking about what do you want to be when you grow up, and he was going to be a doctor. He wanted to go on to college, medical school, and I thought, geez, that'd be a good way to help people. So I think when I first started out, I headed off to college with the idea of being a doctor, and I guess I wanted to be a doctor that could help people of all ages, young to old, different varieties. And so when I got to college, that was my goal: do pre-medical classes, become a doctor, and
in the spirit of helping people.
Yes. What happened in college, though, was that I started getting exposed to things that were really interesting, like Beethoven and a music class. I took a music class. I took art history classes. I took studio art classes, history of the film. I just got interested in so many different things, And I took a class in design, and they gave you they gave you 20 problems to solve. 10 were visual 3D, and 10 were 2D. And I started, generating these things. And halfway through the class, the instructor says, you got some real talents in the art field. Maybe you should consider a career in the art.
And you had, in high school, you had never done much with visual arts or arts?
It's funny. My mom was great at rendering. She helped me with school projects. She could draw really well. And I said, as a kid, I want to do that. And I did some art in grade school. But my parents, especially my father, was not really a fan of the arts.
Yeah.
And my mom was, but my dad wasn't, and he kind of directed things more or less. So when it came time to decide on a path, the art career wasn't something that he really encouraged. But he did love the idea of me being a doctor.
Okay.
But I did do something. I did do some things in the art kind of realm. But again, I wasn't as great as some other kids in school. Really good at rendering. I mean, rendering was, I thought, the way to be
illustration.
An artist. Illustration, drawing beautifully recognizable kind of images and things like that. So I didn't think I was that good at it, but I loved it. I loved the creativity of it. Anyway, when I came home for my junior year, middle of the junior year, and I told them I'm thinking of changing careers, changing majors, at the dinner table, my parents were completely silent. They said, "There's no way you're going to do that. A man has to, provide for the family. They have to have a good job. Art's not going to do it. You got to get a job that you can take care of a family for it." So they said, "We don't support that." And they were helping me pay the school bills, so I went along.
And by went along, were you upset? Were you mad? Or were you just back on track and kind of forgot about it?
I was devastated. I went back. I took it incomplete in the design class. In other words, I didn't finish it. And all my projects were laying out on the table, and some of the kids in my dorm, they said, "You're not Picasso, you're Peake asshole," because I was like taking up valuable counter space with all my projects. But anyway, so I never finished it, and I dedicated myself to finishing as a major in chemistry.
For your undergrad, with the intention of going to medical school.
And applied to medical school, went to medical school,
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, going to medical school seems like that's 4 years, plus you have residency. To
Right.
me, that sounds like something that it's about rules and following what someone else has figured out and adhering to protocols. That doesn't sound like there's any creativity at all.
To a large extent, you're right.
Okay.
There's what they call algorithms. You start here and you have a break point and you choose yes or no, and then you go down here. And, there's a lot of algorithms to follow for deciding, what disease do you have, or what are you coming in with?
And those are algorithms that someone else figured out.
That's right.
So you
That's
are
right.
You are following the rules, so to speak.
Right. I think the creativity comes in asking the questions and being curious, which again is something that I think helps if you give time and let the person talk and express themselves and can maybe delineate what they're feeling, where it came from, and all that. Then you can kind of guide your path to diagnosing what they have. But again, there's various diseases, there's various patterns of diseases, and your job is to try to fit your complaints into a pattern and say, oh, it's congestive heart failure, or oh, it's a pneumonia or something. But you do follow these basic kind of rules to get there.
How do you think all of those years of studying and practicing medicine has affected your creative output? Like, if we think about if you never did that, if you rebelled and actually did not pursue medicine but pursued art, where you would be compared to where you are now. And the reason why I ask that is I have a degree in engineering. So that is it's kind of similar in medicine in that I'm basically reproducing knowledge patterns and rules that somebody else had. And that has definitely affected, well, certainly a lot of my life. but it definitely comes through in my art. Have you ever thought about how those years of using those types of brain cycles have affected your creative output?
You know, I had an interesting conversation with the artist about this because he also came from a scientific background, biology career. And you know, I think how I see myself as an artist is solving problems. If somebody comes in with a question, I'm trying to help them solve a problem. Maybe you're solving an engineering problem, but it's solving a problem. So, you know, when you're painting something or creating something, inevitably you get stuck, or you come to a point where you don't know which way to go, and you have to take a look at it in a more analytical way and say, okay, does this need more color? Does this need more black? Does this need darker, lighter? You know, you kind of ask these questions maybe systematically, like an engineer or a clinician would, and then you get guided into your next step. So I think some of that came from the science background and the kind of fields that I was in. I think the other thing that I've noticed about me is I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I do have this drive to finish, to keep going, this perseverance. So sometimes it's just a matter of kind of getting up and doing the work, you know, every day. When I started I changed careers. I went from medicine full-time to painting full-time. You know, I felt like a poser. You know, I hadn't gone to art school. I hadn't gotten a BFA, MFA. It was as if I was saying I was an artist, but I wasn't. And this artist I was talking about, the biology turned artist, said, just get up and paint. And that's what I did. So for 6-7 hours a day, I just get up and paint, and you know, gradually acquired the skills, the confidence to then say, yeah, I guess I'm an artist.
That part of your personality, or that part of your being that is has that stick-to-itiveness, where do you think that comes from? Do you think that was a result of genetics? You were born with that? Do you think it was a combination of genetics and proper guidance from parents and teachers, or a combination?
Yeah, I don't know. I go back to my childhood, and you know, I did decently in school, but I wasn't perfect. Like
Didn't you graduate valedictorian of your high school?
I did.
Okay.
But I mean,
more than decent.
But in grade school, you know, I'd come back and I'd have like an A-, and my mom would say, "Honey, that's really good, but next time bring it up to an A." So there was always this sense of, I mean, on the one hand, it was not good enough. But on the other hand, it was like, you can, you know, keep trying, do better, keep excelling, keep trying to improve. So I got, you know, both messages from my mom. It was my mom's kind of that I remember. So in some ways, I was always, you know, trying to improve, trying to get better, trying to excel. I was valedictorian in my high school. I graduated with distinction in college. You know, I mean, I kind of did the hard work.
Yeah. So going back to being valedictorian, that to me that means you have that you had the ability as a young boy, where young boys are all over the place, to actually stay focused on a task and to stay focused on a task. That is not something that happens a lot. That seems to be something that is not always that common, and it sounds like you must have had that early on.
Yeah, you know, everything is kind of probably multiply driven, but you know, I had a good friend in high school, and the two of us were constantly egging each other on and challenging each other, and the truth of it is that there were really 3 valedictorians. We were all so close that they decided they would just call us tri-valedictorians. Okay. But he and I, this other guy, I mean, we talked on the phone every night. We were like helping each other with work. I mean, it was like that camaraderie, the collaboration of sort of doing high school together with somebody that I think you know, challenged us. And he was the one that went on to be a doctor, and I wanted to sort of follow in his path. And
so you both became doctors.
That's right.
And what happened to the other valedictorian? Do you know?
He went into business and worked for an oil company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you got into medicine because you had a a drive to help people.
Yeah.
And do you feel that with what you're doing creatively, with painting, teaching dance, and your writing, do you feel like you are helping people? Do you feel like you're meeting that goal, and in what way?
Well, that's interesting, because when I quit medicine, and I was seeing 16 people a day. I had a staff that I worked with. I was talking to consultants on the phone all the time, so I had a lot of connection with people. But when I stopped medicine and started painting full time, 2006, I was in my studio alone, and I didn't like it. I definitely wasn't helping anybody except myself. So what I ended up doing was, after several months of doing this, I got good enough to say, I could teach this. And I also started modeling, because my interest was people, so I started painting people. And so I did life drawing classes. I also modeled for classes. And so I felt like I was helping somebody and helping them start in painting and get on their artistic careers. So yeah, so that was I think what I needed to do to feel like I was really serving that need to be helpful to people. Dancing is pretty helpful. I mean, not helpful. Dancing gives you a chance to interact with people. And once I'd been dancing for 15 or so years, I felt this urge to teach. I taught medical students for years and years, so I've always had this love of teaching people, and then of course teaching art, and then so lately I've been teaching dance. And again, I'm not a certified instructor of dance, but I know more than most people who are just starting dancing, so I feel like I have something to offer. And I think what I'm offering too is the encouragement, that energy, that enthusiasm to sort of move to music and to move with a partner and enjoy that feeling of dancing with someone.
And you are currently, so in terms of teaching that you're doing, dance is currently the only thing that you're doing?
Yeah, as far as teaching goes.
As teaching, okay.
Yeah.
And if somebody was interested in your classes, it's at Main Street Arts in Saxons River, Vermont.
Yeah.
And we are recording this in October of 2023, so I don't know when people are going to be listening to this.
Right. Yeah, we're kind of bringing dance to Main Street Arts as one of their many art offerings. Yeah.
Matt, one of the creative outputs that you are engaged in is writing. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess I started out by saying I try to introduce a creative aspect to a lot of things that I do in life. And it's funny because on my SATs, I got high scores in math and science, but I got kind of medium scores in verbal. So I don't feel like I got a great vocabulary or a great kind of depth of knowledge in writing. But I like playing with words. I like alliteration. I like puns. I like conversing. And I also like people and relationships. And I guess somewhere along the line, this is maybe a dozen or more years ago, I got interested in writing about relationships, and read a book by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird, which she describes her process of writing, which basically means introduce a character, introduce another character, develop the characters, have them interact, and see what happens. And it's kind of counterintuitive. You think, well, shouldn't we know what's going to happen? But sometimes if you just put two people together who you're faithfully developed and faithfully can represent their ways of acting and reacting, you can kind of create something out of, well, you don't know where it's going to go. And so I started writing about these kind of things in the early 2000s. And I had some friends that encouraged me, and for me, there's a I don't know, I've always felt a aliveness flirting with people. Flirt with men, flirt with women. I just like that interaction, that frisson that's created by the the sexual kind of interaction. I think we all have to some extent, and maybe I'm only speaking for myself here, but anyway, a lot of my writing involves people who I put together. create an interaction that leads to a tension point, a crisis point, and then a development out of that leads one or both of them to a different person. They change. There's always a sexual element in it, and so some people call that erotica for English majors, because there's a more than just the sexual content. There's the evolution of the characters. So I started writing this, and got published on some sites that were fun. Good editors helped me out with writing, and were really helpful. And I've continued it, and I don't know. I find it fun to just play with characters and invent sort of people and then their reactions as they kind of interact. Yeah.
That sounds fascinating. Particularly the thing that kind of got me excited was you talking about flushing out two characters and then having them interact live. It's almost like starting a painting and you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
You didn't sketch it out and didn't do an underpainting.
Yeah.
And that sounds so interesting. I am particularly interested in, I have a lot of things that I'm doing right now, but creative writing is definitely something that I'm going to have to look at some point, because I feel like it relates very much to painting. And then I also, I'm playing piano. It relates to that. It's like storytelling, and it's a new way of, it's a creative language. Obviously, it is. But in the same way that learning music theory and piano is a creative language, and learning skills in painting is a creative language, I would love to be able to do it with writing. Did you go to classes to learn how to do this?
No, I just read, Anne Lamott's book, and then Stephen King wrote a book on writing,
yeah.
which he did his process, and it was very similar. He just puts two characters in a situation and sees what develops. And I didn't believe it could happen, but it really can. It really can. No, someday I'd like to interview you about music and how it's influencing painting, because for me, dance has subtly influenced how I paint. I started doing paintings of people, nudes holding fruit, and then I did a series from above, and when I did this series, people were commenting. They said it looks like dancers. Now, I did not consciously say, I'm composing these in any fashion like dance, but yet it came out like that. And now you're talking about how music kind of works through your painting, and to me, that's a little bit harder for me to understand, because the dancing aspect I can see.
The human brain is really interesting. It is really, really interesting.
Gotta love it.
It's definitely more art than science up here. I think for everyone. I don't know if most people realize that.
Yeah.
Well, this was wonderful. I could continue talking to you for another hour, but so we'll definitely have you back, and we can continue this conversation. And it sounds like you have some more questions for me. So we'll definitely have you back if you're up for it. But thank you so much for being part of Eager to Know.
I'm very privileged. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.